Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Julia Galea, and this is Caker's Chat. Today we are live with Kerry, Vincent, everyone. Are you guys excited? Good morning, Kerry.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, we're doing fine. Do you guys hear us, and do you hear Kerry fine? The reason why you see Kerry on the screen and it's just a photo is because we were just discussing that Kerry doesn't have an iPhone, an iPad, and she doesn't use those apparatus. How liberating is that, Kerry?
Actually, it's great because I didn't have to learn any toys. I don't care about people tracking me, and I'm sick to death of looking at the tops of people's head when they're trying to talk to me, and they're surreptitiously got an iPad at the side of themselves, and their eyes are always on the screen, and I find it really rude, and I'm old school, so if I don't need one of those things, then I don't need one. And just to quote my husband, he tells people that the only time I keep a phone in my hand is one of those old clamshell phones from probably the early 90s, which should be classified as maybe antique and in a museum someplace, that he slaps it in my car when I go on a long distance drive just so that he knows that I'm safe, and if there's an alarm to be made that I can call somebody. But it has no little touchy-feely buttons to push to listen, look, or tune in to things, or sit there and take pictures of myself, etc. And if I want to take pictures, I have a real camera, because all of the stuff that's taken with those iPhones and so forth in the long term are totally useless. The resolution is so grainy that they're not worth the real. I mean, it's fun at the time, but a lot of those photos maybe you want to keep for the future. And so even with that, I've opted to have a real camera, not something that's doing multiple tasking, which, by the way, doesn't work because nobody multiple tasks well. So there you go. So, nobody ever sees me with a phone, and everybody on, with my television career, it was really funny because they thought I should have a phone. And there was one funny experience in Denver when we were shooting Food Network Challenge years ago. And the executive producer had a phone, and it was 1:30 in the morning, and we were all tired from a 16, 17-hour shoot. And she thought she couldn't find me in multiple rooms, and so she decided to call. And when she called the number, it was 2 o'clock in the morning in Oklahoma, and my husband picked up the phone, and he said, "Who is this?" And she said, "It's Sarah." And this is a standing joke between both of us, even years later. And she said, is Kerry there? And he said, "Sarah from TV." And she said, "Yes." He said, "Isn't she with you?" And he said his stomach turned over because he thought something had happened to me.
Oh, poor guy.
And she said, "Where is this?" And he said, "Well, it's Doug, her husband, and I'm in bed, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning." And she was red in the face, so embarrassed. And she said, "Oh my goodness," she said, "I thought this was a cell phone."
Oh, good
he said, "No,
God.
she doesn't have a cell phone, but don't worry." He said, "I just heard her laughing, so she's not that far away." And so she walked into the next room, and there I was. So that's just a fun little snippet from behind the scenes that happened one time. And Sarah, to this day, every time she mentions my husband's name, she said, "Oh God, I feel so terrible about calling him at 2 o'clock in the morning and scaring him to death because, he thought she was calling to let him know that something, was missing and something had happened to me." But it was not the case.
Oh my goodness, Kerry. I mean, and meanwhile, nowadays, to be honest, a great number of people don't even have landlines.
I do. That's why we have a good line.
You're right. You're absolutely correct.
And I will never give it up for that very reason, because for interviews and things, a landline is much better than a dropping cell phone, which you often hear. Sometimes I have to listen to people 6 times in one conversation. The phone, they move and they're driving somewhere and the phone's dropping out right, left and centre. So, and mine never drops out. So there we go. Of course, now it's going to drop out just to be a pain, but just because I said so. But no, I don't have any problems with my phone whatsoever.
It comes down to reliability, to be honest.
Yes, indeed.
Well, good morning, everyone. We are going to take some audience questions, and thank you guys for sending in some of your questions, and we're going to ask Kerry some of those too. And we're going to go through basically her journey and how she got into cakes, first of all. Your questions, and then we're going to go through our Baker's Dozen questions. Do you have your tea in hand, Kerry?
I do, actually.
Absolutely. Perfect. So you're a farmer's daughter.
I am indeed. My father owned a station which was called Mugan, and that was the first place where I was brought up. We were long way from schools in the city, and my first schooling was done with pedal radio, which is an interesting little gadget that a German immigrant in Australia concocted so that people who lived in the outback could be connected to the rest of the people.
I see.
Our closest neighbour was 269 miles away, so we didn't see people, and we had party line telephone, which was interesting because people now these days probably don't know too much about them, but they were one line where multiple people could use that same line, and each person was designated a number of rings. So our number was 3 rings, so if it rang 3 times, that meant that was for us.
Wow.
If it rang 4 times, it was for the neighbour. And then the School of the Air was how I started at school, and then when that became difficult, then I went to boarding school.
Wow. Kerry, I mean,
Traeger was the German who invented the machine called the pedal radio, and there was an initiative in Australia at the time that because everybody was so isolated that were living out on farms and in the outback, that no person should not be connected to central life. And so even if a person had to have a telephone line run 1,000 miles, excuse me, that's that fog again. Even if they were 1,000 miles just from a central, metropolis or cosmopolitan area, they still got their phone. And so that was the government's mantra was nobody should be isolated. Everybody in Australia at the time was pretty much isolated because people were spread into the interior. And when you consider that Australia is the equal size of the United States in land
right,
mass,
it's huge.
that you have 320 million people, we had only 20 million people. So it's a big difference. So people are pretty spread out. Around the coast, not so. The cities are developed like they are here. Anything coastal goes, but there's so few people to be in a lot of those places. We have things called the 80-mile beach or the 100-mile beach that nobody's on or ever goes to except occasionally to visit, and you can be there and not see a soul while you're there. So it's they don't even call them names. It's just a length of beach that people rarely visit, and sooner or later over the millennia it'll start to change and people will move further and further north up the coast. But as most people do, they tend to stick around the capital cities and spread from there, so it'll take a while.
Kerry, you must be, could you have imagined the world the way it is right now? And here you are, basically you were a farmer's daughter from Western Australia, a place where you needed 3 rings to get a hold of you, and which was an amazing miracle then. And here we are walking around with basically TV sets and computers in our hands.
Well, yeah, except I'm still walking around with the occasional clam phone. I don't know how far I've moved along, but when you think about it, the computers that sent the astronauts to the moon for the first time did not have the computer advancement that each individual person is walking around with in their hand on an everyday basis here. Those machines were massive, great big things that filled rooms to get the responses and so forth that they needed in order to go into space. So
it's mind-blowing.
I've seen technology change. I saw, sat there and watched on television when man went to the moon, all of the things that, it's been an interesting lifespan really, the changing fast-changing technical advances that have happened. It's quite. Anybody that's born, around 2000 or 1995 is living in a completely different world than the one that I lived in.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that the technology world may be advanced, but sometimes it has some deficits that I could live without. One of the things that's one of my pet peeves is the fact that in a few states in the United States, I learned from NPR that there are 15 states in this United States that actually handwriting is not required anymore, that keyboarding is the thing to do. And I'm thinking, so what happens when the electricity goes out? And when I find out from a friend that one of these children who has actually graduated with keyboarding had to sign a contract for some kind of educational, tertiary education, and it was something that was binding, and had to learn to actually sign her own name because she couldn't write.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, so what the hell is all that about? I wonder what we will look like when we are in the same place as where they're decanting what's happening with the Egyptian pyramids, where all of these wonderful treasures and all of the hieroglyphics that are on the walls, what are we going to leave behind? A layer of plastic,
Yep.
a layer of disposable phones, and the waste and the recycling that's not being done at the rate that it should be done. A pile of diapers in the junk piles that are called our trash and garbage heaps. Is it going to look that pretty for us? I'm kind of having some thoughts about that. And even in the fashion industry, my brain is computing on a different level to other people. I look back and I see the gorgeous gowns in museums and so forth that we have been inspired by, even in our own art, to create things to emulate the stitchery, the laces and all of those things, all dying these days.
Well,
But also with all of this splendid plasticky silicon type inserts that are being woven into the material, in 4 or 5 years they start to perish. So you could pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 if you have the money, or even more, for a gorgeous gown, and find out that, you know, you go and look at it 10 years, 15 years from now, and it'll all fall apart because of all of that rubbery stuff that they've got in there that they call spandex.
Right. Well,
that bothers me.
I hear it, and I understand you completely, and I'm with you there. As somebody who is living, you know, it seems like we can't even get proper tools, proper ingredients, and we're going back to you being a farmer's daughter. I mean, you actually know, you went from, you were the original farm to table.
I was the original what?
Farm to table, like
sure.
Right, like this is a new trend here saying, oh, we should really eat farm to table. That's tradition. That's how it was done once, and we're trying to basically go back to the way things were. So
I'm sorry that we ever left the things that were when it comes to eating food that should be, the norm.
Right.
I have a mantra, and I even used it last night when I was out for dinner, when somebody asked me a question about GMOs and things with preservatives and other additives in there. And frankly, if everybody would use this before they shove something down their mouths, they might feel better, because if you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't be eating it. Huge words that it takes you 5 minutes to sort of figure out how to say it. Then it's time for you to leave that product behind. I don't understand how it has been that all of this stuff can be put into food to make a lettuce last 6 weeks. Why do we have bread that lasts a month? Why do we have bread that never goes bad? I mean, I want it to be green in 3 days. If it's green in 3 days, I know they didn't put anything in it.
Right.
So the mantra is, if you buy the loaf and you can't eat it in 3 days, okay, you can shove it in the freezer and extend its life a little bit there, and pull some of it down the night before, put it in a plastic bag, and it will be just fine.
Kerry,
excuse me with this. It definitely is that fog, because I never have scratchy voice.
Oh,
where we should be less sick than we used to be, we have become so dependent on antibiotics and all sorts of other stuff that are a quick cure. But if we didn't have something wrong with us in the first place because we were eating rubbish, then probably we wouldn't even need half the stuff that we have that's a Band-Aid on whatever's wrong with us.
Well, Kerry, do you say that goes for cakes as well? I take it you're a scratch girl?
Sure. I mean, why not? I mean, there's some things I'll use commercial fondant because that's the easy thing for me to do, because I used to make it in the first years when I did it, and that's one of the reasons that people have roll fondant here, is because in 1989 I was sick to death of making it, and I had muscles on top of muscles because it's pretty labour intensive. I burned out, I think, 4 KitchenAids trying to make it.
Oh, Lord.
And then I just decided that, okay, it had to be a joint affair, so I would start it around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and these big batches of like 20 pounds at a time, or 10 kilos for those that are listening that are into metric. Then I would get most of it done, and then my husband would come back from the office and he would help me knead it until it was ready for storage. And I just decided that, it was enough. So I went to Backles in Australia and just said to them, you guys need to come to the United States, purely selfishly, because I wanted it here for me.
Right.
But I figured if I needed it here for me, there would be others that would be wanting it for themselves as well. And it wasn't a popular thing to be doing at the time.
Right, Kerry.
In fact, it was a handful of people across the United States that were doing. But anyway, I begged them, and they did come, and they did set up a factory, and then I became part of the R&D process. Okay. Because there were things that the way it was marketed in Australia was not going to work here.
Okay.
And the reason for that was because roll fondant is known in the old school of people in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and elsewhere as plastic icing. And if it had been marketed as plastic icing, it would never have made it. So I knew, because I'd lived here long enough to understand the locals,
right,
that we needed to change the name. And so we sat down and we chatted, and we thought about poured fondant. And then we thought, well, that's a covering. And then there's buttercream and poured fondant as a glacé finish. And then there's, a fondant that can be rolled. So it's almost all of it's got sugar as the base ingredient, so it wasn't a big stretch. And from then on, it was 10 years of really hard work getting it to market. And at that time, I used to help the company who started coming to the big shows in the US. I did DBA, IBIE, and all of those. Been there, done all of them, and got it off the road. And then Maria McBride, who was with Brides magazine, commissioned me to do one of those cakes in roll fondant, and they featured it in Brides magazine along with 3 or 4 other ladies from different parts of the country. And then Martha decided that she liked the look of it, so she pushed it. And of course, in the middle to end 90s, even to this day, but not as much, whatever Martha said, we all did, or people did. I wasn't as big a devotee, but nice, but, it was a different way of doing stuff. It was more commercial, and I was a fine artist, so I didn't really care about the wham bam, thank you ma'am style of decorating, but people hung on her every word with her books, and that was good for me, and it was good for the company. So the next thing we knew, 2002, so we've gone from 89 to 2002, and I was running the Sugar Art Show at that stage, and I decided that I was going to invite Food Network to do a special about the show. And at the end of 2002, they came and did the first special on cake and sugar craft, and focused on the wedding competition. Then producer went back to Denver. Her name was Michelle Bills, and at the time, what I didn't know was she and the production company were looking for a judge for Food Network. In fact, they were looking for a few judges in order to try them out for partnerships to see how the chemistry was. And they apparently at that stage had a couple of men in mind, but they wanted a woman. And when she went back there, she said to Tom Geeson, she said, I think I've found the judge. And they shot footage because I was actually the host on air for the Sugar Arts show. And as soon as he saw me on camera, he said, that's it, she's it. So I had a phone call. So I wasn't looking for anything. In fact, what I was doing was promoting all of the cake artists that were in the Sugar Arts show. And they had this, opportunity of exposure that had never happened before and continues actually to this day. They did 4 specials here that went to 157 nations. So everybody knows about the Oklahoma State Sugar Arts Show and the Grand National Wedding Cake Competition.
Absolutely, it's epic.
The publicity that we get, which is driven by me because I'm good at what I do, and it's all focused on each of the entrants. It has nothing to do with my cakes or my side of life. In fact, I just finished doing a write-up for a spread for 14 of them that will go into a magazine in the UK. And so, I'm a mentor, and I give them a hard time if they don't do as well as I think they should, because I know a lot of them that what they're capable, and I don't want them to drop the ball. And those that need nurturing and patting on the head to get them over some hurdles, I'm there to do that. And most of the people who are seriously good at what they do, they know when they blow it, and they're the first to admit it. And then there's some that will never admit anything. Everybody in the world is wrong, and they should be, the shining artist and whatnot. And so I have to live with the flack that's fall out from that. But like I said before we came on air, none of that stuff bothers me. It's today's teacup storm, and tomorrow there's something else. It's just learning to be gracious, to be a part of the competitive world, and it's easy to win with grace, but it's damned hard to lose with grace if you have a really bad attitude. And you should just look at it each time as a reunion, a family affair. Do the best you can and recognize that the person who beat you is really worthy, instead of sending me millions of emails telling me how disgusting everybody was because they feel like, they were wronged. But some people can't see anybody else's work except their own. So after 23 years, I have learned, it's okay, let them babble, say what they have to say. After a week or two, it all dies down, and then, we're focused on next year. And hopefully, in fact, I believe that when you lose, you learn more than you do when you win. There's a lot of things that you know in your heart that you can fix. You know if you covered up a hole and put a flower in a space that shouldn't be there because there was some kind of crack in the fondant or you stuck your fingernail in there. I mean, we've all been there, done that. Nobody's immune. So it's just easier to say, okay, put that behind me and let's move on and into new territory and new things. And I will say one thing. You had a question there about the perfume bottles. It's not about perfume bottles. It's about the industry of perfume, which if it was stuck with bottles, I'd have millions of bottles running around the competition. It's about the fields. It's about the flowers that are stilled. It's into the elixir that is the perfume that goes into the bottle. It is the bottles. It's the couturiers that design the lines around the bottles and the facade that has been a mystique actually, with perfume for gazillion years. So it's a big industry with lots of nuances that should be really exciting for people to go down that road and find all sorts of things on the internet that they can research in different countries. Of course, the first that comes to mind is the obvious, which France has always been at the head of all of those developments of new perfumes and old ones, and they're really good at that. They don't use any synthetics in their perfumes. And if you've ever been to the lavender fields in the Provence, which I have, it's just, as far as the eye can see, a lavender haze. The roses, all sorts of different flowers that are developed purely for perfume. So that will give competitors plenty of options for whatever flower that they choose to pick. It's going to be a perfume or an eau de toilette or something that is developed from a certain flower. So that gives them flower options.
Kerry?
Gives them advertising options.
Kerry? Sorry to interrupt you. Just to clarify, what she's talking about right now is next year's theme for the Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show. So we started talking about next year's theme, and that's what she's talking about, that it's basically not about the perfume bottles, but the perfume industry itself, and that's why we started talking about the elixirs, the advertisement, the flowers that go into the making of them.
Mm-hmm. The oils.
The oils.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So these are the things that we need to use as inspiration for the show. Let's just backtrack a little bit, because, I mean, you're giving us such wonderful information, things that we didn't know. I mean, basically, you were the first to... There was no fondant here, and it kind of took a while for fondant to... become as popular as it became today. And one piece of information I did not know is that basically that Food Network channel had a show that you invited them to discuss the Grand National Wedding Cake Competition first, and then Challenge was born from there, or it was right.
And actually, much of the rules for Challenge, which were not set up at the time, were written, and some of it was based from the basic stuff that was in the rules that I was using for Oklahoma, except for the technical refined skills, because nobody in their right mind has an expectation that somebody is going to be able to shunt out a really perfectly executed piece in 8 hours with an assistant that may be a bit icky when it comes to, having the shared skills. Now, if you're a Karen Portaleo, you did churn out some amazing, perfectly executed stuff, but she was kind of in the minority rather than the majority. There was some good work that came out, but there were things that had to be sacrificed because of time, and nobody really understands until they get under that TV camera. The lights are hugely hot when you're under stress. Doesn't matter how much you talk to yourself. It's hard work, there's no question. But over the average result from Challenge would look really great, and it could be that it was somewhere in the 75%, if you were looking at it from strictly a competition point of view, from the refined side of things. But nobody expected them to be able to be absolutely perfect in 8 hours. Right. With the size of the piece of work that they had to do. So it was more about, show us a big sculpted or large scale edifice, and so that it looked, and colourful, so that it looked good on camera.
And that show, Challenge, was both wonderful for the industry, for the cake industry, and sure. Also it did have its negative downside. It kind of introduced everybody, and it was almost a platform for a lot of cake celebrities today to become what they are today.
Sure. The standards on Challenge were high in comparison to some of the shows that have been making now, and it was also some new territory for production companies. And I can remember when we started out, and I was on Challenge for 10 years, and I did over 400 episodes. The interesting thing thing was that the first shows that we went to, instead of the stainless steel kitchen that we got used to later, it was all stepping stones. We had, 8-foot tables draped with black cloth, and I can remember one of the first ones that I did. When you look at where Buddy Balestro has gone, I'm really proud of him because he used his appearances to market himself in such a way that he actually did something with it. There is a lot of people that, were on it, and I was kind of surprised after the fact because they didn't use those appearances to market themselves because they thought that everything was going to come to them because they had been on TV. Well, it's like the news. Today you're in the news, and tomorrow you're the trash that went to the bin. So those kind of expectations were pretty, wildly awful, really, when you got down to it, because you have to have a marketing idea, you have to have thought process to put together about what it is you want to do with your life, and most people have no business plan ever, and they just troll from one thing to the next, and that's not going to get you anywhere. And I think the first thing is education, then rounding up your skills so that you are the best you can be, and I hate that sentence, but that you are really top of the line in what you've chosen to do, that you have exhausted all the nuances of it, and then you can market yourself. But a lot of people go off half-cocked. It's like, oh, well, I'll do one TV show. Oh, my goodness, I'm famous. Now I need somebody to have me out there with endorsements and all that sort of stuff. Well, nothing is instant. It's not like instant oatmeal. You have to work for it. You have to earn respect, and you have to, as I've said to many of them before, crawl before you walk, before you run. And I said that when I met you in New York, and I will say it until, I'm breathless, because unless you go through all the steps, there are no shortcuts. Why should there be? Unless, some talent scout from Hollywood pops up and says, okay, I'm going to make you a star and get you into a Hollywood movie that has to be a blockbuster. It's not going to happen.
And what's the probability of that happening, Kerry?
Do what?
What's the probability of that actually happening?
Oh, hit by lightning, probably more so.
Kerry, so how do we earn respect? How do we go about doing that?
Just shut your mouth and do your work and compete. That's one of the main places where you can show people where you're going. I can watch from people that started with me 23 years ago who, at the time, everybody thought they were doing amazing work. And then years passed on, 10 years, and their work was better and better. And then you have people who start to win and get the big one for the Grand National, or even placing is considered excellence. At the end of it, when I talk to them and say, oh, I have some pictures from 23, don't show those to anybody, I don't want anybody to see that now. I said, well, you have to learn to understand your journey.
Right.
And you keep on the journey. You don't stop because you won.
Right.
Because there's always somebody else next year that's going to be wanting to knock you clean off your perch, and they're just as busy too. So you don't take anything for granted. It's, keep on moving on. And I've watched skills that have progressed from pretty okay, sometimes not okay, to absolutely top of the line and could fit anywhere on this planet in any competition, and would give those that people look to the UK and to Australia as excellent technicians of their craft, because they like to do things that are refined and difficult to achieve, and they're right up there with them now. But if they hadn't had that show, they'd still be where they were 23 years ago. So National and other parts of the show actually, if I counted up how many of those people ended up on Food Network Challenge and how many times I was called to say, okay, we need bodies that are really good at what they do and we don't even know where to start to ask, can you recommend? And I give them a great list of names and contact information. Where it went from there after that, I could care less. That was up to them to do the casting. That was their job. I just helped them find people. And there's a lot of people from the Oklahoma State Sugar Arts Show that ended there. And it gave them an opportunity to have some kind of, focus on what they were doing. And then after that, if they were in a place where they used that business opportunity to make it better for themselves, then so be it.
Oh, I mean, it's just it's a mind-blowing, really, how basically the fact that people compete. It's not just a competition to see where you are at, but it's also a way for the industry to push itself into new bounds, and just push the envelope, as they say, or the ceilings.
Well, now I have competitors that I know what they started out at, and these competitors are now doing endorsed products for companies. They have ideas of their own, which they have gone to companies to produce, and they have been produced.
Okay.
And it's quite nice. I mean, for me to sit back, it's like Kerry is the little spider in the middle of the web.
Okay.
And I've got all of these little hatchlings running all over. And watching where they flop, where they end on their feet, and things that happen, and how many letters I get from them, emails, but a lot of handwritten cards, which I find very nice, saying how much they've appreciated the fact that I have been a thorn in their backside, but because I kept pushing and say, okay, you did a great cake this year, but you lost your way when it came to, and whatever the thing was, you need to fix it. I can tell I'm not the judge. I don't judge the show. The judges are brought in to do that. So I don't second guess what their opinions are. They give me the list and that's it. But after the photography is reviewed and the fact that I'm able to see the cakes firsthand as I'm running around doing jobs and things at the show, and then I can see, I have people who say to me, why did I not do well? And so I'll take a look at the pictures, and the first thing that hits me at the face is, for example, in 2015, I counted up 15 or 16 cakes that were not vertical. They were on a list. They were as much as 3 to 5 degrees off center. Well, as soon as a judge sees that, it's nothing to do with even technique. They did brilliant techniques and they're upset because they did great techniques. But if you can't put the architectural picture together, and not a cake decorator on the planet half the time will stand back 20 feet and look at their cake and think, okay, is that thing straight? And immediately, you're at a deficit because you just threw 5 points away because you didn't have it straight, and that to me is unforgivable. And I have had people argue with me and say, oh, it was straight. Okay, well, when you get your photograph, then you call me and tell me how straight it was. I'm not sitting here looking at this being mean to you. I am telling you that you need to get a spirit level on the top of that, each of the layers, when you are putting them together, and make sure that they line up, that one is not an nth of a degree right or left more than it should be, because if it's not centered, number one, and then they put the icing on, and the icing is higher on one side and lower on the other, and you shove another cake on there, you may not be thinking that you're doing this, but you are building a topsy-turvy cake that was never meant to be.
Right.
So anybody that's smart will listen to me, and next year they'll fix that. Now this year, all of I mentioned to them that had crooked cakes that were not deliberate, I didn't see as many this year.
Right.
So they listened.
So they listened,
and
right.
It's my job as Mother Cake to make sure that all of these people know, and some people may see it as interfering, stupid them, because I'm on their side. Mm-hmm. It's my fight on their behalf to push them so that they can confound the judges. The judges don't want to be mean. They're just seeing things that aren't right, and rightfully so, have to say, okay, I'm sorry, but I can't give you points for that, or I have to deduct.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but at the end of the day, it's the only way you're going to learn. I mean, what if they glossed over and said, oh, it's lovely? So I would be looking at crooked cakes for the next 5 years,
right.
If I didn't say anything. So it's my job to mentor those that want to be mentored, or if I see anything that's really a discrepancy, I call them and say, hey, did you look at your picture? See the thing on the right-hand side? That needs to go. You mustn't do that again because it's going to cost you. And everybody that I have ever called has always been in good shape and don't get crabby and irritable about being told that there's something not quite right.
Kerry, I have to say, you're a personality that people either love you or they just can't stand you because they find you.
Who cares?
Who cares, right?
About that.
But
childish things. I'm a grown woman. I'm a senior citizen. I am very definitely. I say what's on my mind, and they can say what's on their mind. But whatever. It's easy to hide with the anonymity of the internet and say all sorts of stuff. But I have this lovely little index finger that loves to hit the block button. I don't swear everything from them. But if they start using the F word or that stuff around me, sorry. If I was close to you, I'd wash your mouth out with soap. But since I can't, but I can block you. And you can disappear.
Love it.
So I just, it's not worth the energy to worry about all of those that have the hate thing. The hate thing actually has nothing to do with whatever is going on in actual fact. It's more an envy, jealousy thing. It's like they see that I have something that they want, and so therefore, it's time to create the hate mail. But most of the time, the ones that start out not loving me that much in the beginning, and I even had one on my Facebook page today who said initially they didn't love me on television, that they thought I was hypercritical and I was difficult and blah, blah, blah. But then after a few episodes, they came to love me, so I guess I kind of rub off on people eventually.
But Kerry,
many of my really close friends that absolutely did not like me when they first met me, and now they'd go to hell and back for me.
Absolutely.
It goes with the territory.
Kerry, I wonder this because of my husband. There's a lot of sports shows that I watch just because I happen to be in the room. And these coaches are really, really tough on their players. I mean, criticize them, call them all sorts of names and words just to motivate them. And here you are basically doing the same thing, but because you're a woman, and that we're talking about cake, it comes off all, well, she's just being snotty, snoopy, and difficult, and I can never please her. But you know what? If she didn't care, she wouldn't have to say anything. She's trying to push you forward.
I could be all peaches and cream on TV, and everybody would find me very forgettable. So it's no big deal. My job is to tell them what's wrong, and it's their job to fix it. It's as simple as that. But people take sides in this world. It's like a game. And sometimes I come out on the good side and sometimes not on the good side. But It doesn't keep me up at night. I never have difficulty going to sleep because some twit has decided that I'm not the flavour of the month today. But I look at it as every day. It's like yesterday's newspaper everybody's hanging on every word, and today it's in the trash, and they're on to something else. And so I'm yesterday's newspaper, and today I'm the trash, and tomorrow they will have forgotten about me and get busy on somebody else. So from my perspective, at my age, these little games that all of these people are playing, it would be far better if they invested all that time in something positive about themselves instead of making themselves feel good by nailing me or anybody else if it comes to that.
Right.
It's sort of like, you know, anybody that's got more, you know, bigger house or whatever, there's always that envy factor. I frankly look at this whole thing as our cake world is a niche.
Yes.
It is a small niche in this cog that we live in called the world, and we have some people that are visible. They're not celebrities per se, if you take it in the Hollywood sense. Some think that it's more than it is, but it's nothing. I get out of bed every morning, I get my shower and pull on my clothes the same as everybody else, and then I start my work for the day. So what's fantastic about that? I do not have people who wander around managing my life. I do have a manager who takes care of whatever contracts and things that I'm involved with. The rest of it is, you know, an everyday thing. I'm going to be washing dishes like everybody else. I'm going to be maybe doing some writing, which may be what nobody else is doing, but you know, I do write for a lot of magazines, and they have nothing to do with cake and sugar craft, some of them. The obvious is the cake and sugar craft because that's what we're all involved in.
Right.
But I write for mainstream, and
what else do you write?
This is the kind of opportunity that happens that people envy, but in actual fact, they should be thinking about from their own point of view. So 2 years ago, for example, an editor from Tea Time magazine called me, and she said, "I've heard that you're a tea drinker." I said, "Yes, don't even do coffee. Husband does coffee, I do tea. That's it. That's our morning start." And she said, somehow or another, she said, "I know I'm going to do a story about you." And she said, "But I'm not sure what it is." And I said, "Well, you know, I'm here whenever you're ready. So, you know, call me or email me or whatever." So I'd forgotten about it. And in May of this year, I get a call from the editor, and she says, "You remember me?" I said, "Who?" And she told me, and I said, "Okay, yeah." She said, "Well," she said, "I've had this post-it with your name and phone number on it running around my desk for 2 years." And she said, "The sticky's worn off on the back of it." So she said, "If I didn't call you, I would probably lose it. And then I would probably be very upset because I would want to call you. So rather than lose the opportunity," she said, "I have decided that we're going to work together." So, okay, that sounds good. So I said to her, you know, what do you need me to do? And she said, "Well, we'll have an interview." And she said, "I want to go down the focus of ovarian cancer." And I said, "Okay." I said, she'd followed me, so I didn't realize that she was quietly in the background of some of my Facebook chatter. And she said, "September in the United States is ovarian cancer month." And I said, "Yes, and February in Australia is their ovarian cancer month." So I said, "That sounds good to me." So we had the interview, and I gave her some images to use. And the last question she asked me was, "So, what's your favorite tea room?" And I said, "Domestic or international?" And she said, "Doesn't matter." I said, "Famous, well-known, or obscure?" And she said, "Obscure is good." I said, "Well, you probably got all the so-said, you know, suspects like the Ritz in London and all of those, which I love to go there." And she said, yes. So I said, "Okay, how about the Hopeton?" And she said, "Well," she said, "I've never heard of that." I said, okay. So I told her about it, and while we were chatting, her little fingers must have been running around the keyboards, and she said, she went like that, and she said, oh my goodness, she said, it's gorgeous. I said, yeah, and I said, it's not well known about anything about it. So I said, it would be a fun one to go to if you're ever toddling Australia-wide, and she travels internationally. So she said, that sounds good, and so we chatted a bit more, and then all of a sudden it was like a postscript epiphany little moment, and she said, I think I'm going to commission you to write a story about the Copeton. And I said, oh, okay. So from being interviewed, I went to, then I'm going to write my own story from my point of view, and that's going to be in the January-February issue of Tea Time.
Yay!
So what I'm saying is opportunities come from odd directions, and then more recently she has written to say that we will talk in the next couple of weeks when she gets this latest issue out from under about me being a regular contributor to Tea Time magazine.
It's not Cake World,
really. Just fine. So going from being interviewed to suddenly being a contributor, a regular contributor,
right?
And it's not anything to do with cake and sugar craft per se. It's about the tea world, teapots and all that stuff. Well, when the September issue came out, I was absolutely floored because it was officially, she had been referring it to me as the autumn issue and the fall issue. And I thought it was going to be all orange and brown, just like fall normally is. And I did get Tea Time magazine, which had nothing to do with her. It was just something that I liked the magazine because I'm a tea drinker. And so when I saw it for the first time, she never said a word. She actually devoted over half of the magazine to Tea for a Cause, which was ovarian cancer. So all of the images had teal in the teapots and the teacups and the backgrounds. The decorations on the little cakes and so forth had little teal accents that really, then it finished with all of the recipe pages. Everything was all about teal and ovarian cancer. Well, my mother probably was smiling from on high because she died of ovarian cancer, and so I picked up the cause, and so that happened. I was absolutely thrilled because it was more than I could ever imagine.
That's wonderful, Kerry.
I just thought it was going to be a 2-page interview about somebody who likes tea.
Right.
But she surprised me. And then one page at the very front of the magazine, and this was the first for me, and I kind of felt like I was almost like a one-liner quote from Mozart in my cake way, which was a full page decorated in teal, and it was beautifully designed. And it only had a single quote on it from me that said, I'd rather have afternoon tea than eat dinner. And it's true, because I did say it.
Oh, my goodness.
You can hang the dinner. I love a high tea.
That's wonderful,
Actually,
Kerry.
high tea, that's another thing, too, is a misnomer. We use high tea in the United States because people believe that high tea is the tea. Actually, high tea should be called low tea. Low tea is the one where there's more of a meal, which is like sandwiches and little pastries, savory pastries and cakes and so forth, a big mix, and it comes in order when they serve it. And it is low tea because even in Australia, in England and elsewhere on the planet, we do not eat a dinner at night like people here do.
Mm-hmm.
People are asked to sit down to tea. My husband, when we first got married, was kind of shocked, really, because he came on a trip to meet my family, and Mum said, okay, you want to call Doug for tea? And I said, tea's on. And everybody scampered to the table. So he got to the table and he thought he was going to get afternoon tea, you know, a cake and a cup of tea, and it wasn't. It was a meal, you know, with all of it, sandwiches and savouries and all of that, with the cake at the end or the desserty things that they use. It changes from country to country, and for whatever is the new fashionable thing to go on the plates, but it's just how it's referred to. So we just say tea, but if you're in Australia and somebody invites you to tea, you better ask the question, am I coming for an evening meal, or am I sitting down to afternoon tea? The time will tell you. If it's 3 o'clock, it will be afternoon tea. If it's 5:30, you're going to get fed.
Okay. Excellent. Kerry teaching us so much. I mean, that's something I wouldn't have known, to be honest.
No. Well, it's the same in the UK.
Okay. Let's go back to the Oklahoma State Sugar Art Show. I have a question to you from one of our viewers, Jean Chapoal. You know her very well, okay? And she has been
a girl.
Yes.
And she's talented too.
Very talented, and she is going to be entering the grand wedding.
Oh my goodness, she's finally taken the plunge.
Yes! Let's throw up some hearts for Jean. Yes, let's throw up some hearts for Jean. She's taking the plunge, and she's going to enter this year's Grand National Wedding Cake Competition. What should she stay clear of? What kind of advice do you give her?
Read the damned rules. So people never read the rules. When they make a mistake, it's like, did you read the rules? Oh, well, I scanned them. I think Jean has read the rules, because I have not heard anything from her to indicate to me, or anything about a judge's response or whatever, that would give me to indicate that she wasn't okay with what has happened in the past.
Okay.
But the biggest problem is that people don't read the rules. For example, in this last one, there were people who were upset because it didn't come out the way they wanted it. But there was a word called romantic in the description. I don't put that in there because I just had a romantic moment and that I didn't mean it. So Rule 4 means you better read it to get the criteria for what I'm expecting. And there will be, you know, this year's criteria. Don't think because you read it last year or this year that it's going to be okay for next year, because I'm going to change it. Okay. We went from mad for metallics to perfume. So those things that I mentioned earlier about the feels, the oils, and all of the things that go into perfume making, the flowers that are used and so forth, and the stylish bottles and the advertising campaigns that all can be used except the copyright name. I don't want to run foul of Chanel or any of those people. Right. So it can be done in a generic sense, but people get the message from the inspirational picture that's going to be submitted. Right. But, read it. Read it. And if you're not sure, you call me or you write to me and say, is this what you mean? Right. Okay, yeah, I'm going to answer you. I never, ever ignore an email about what happens. And don't write to Lloydine. She's just registration, and she wants to enter like everybody else. Okay. So she can't answer questions. I keep it completely out of it. Okay. So that way, it's good because they can ask me directly, because I'm the one who created the words, and I'm the one that really fully understands the intent of the words. But I just, you know, people will, after the fact, get upset because this didn't happen and that didn't happen. And I'm like, well, tell me what you thought should happen. Right. Oh, well, this was that and that was this. And I'm like, okay, my head's reeling because I saw the cake. I take a picture of every single cake that's there so that referencing back, I can talk somewhat authoritatively. It is not like I am the judge where I'm scrutinizing it with a magnifying glass. But people who have told me that I had the perfect covering on my cake, there was nothing wrong. I get the professional images and I'm looking at a great big rock of fondant that was hard, that they didn't feel when they covered the cake, and you can see the cracks around it. It's like a machine thing. You should be on top of all of those little things. So, and then I tell them, and it's like, no, it isn't. But when they get their photograph, there it is. And then they call me back and say, oh, I didn't see it. Well, of course you didn't.
The judge did.
You would have seen it. You would have done something about it. But actually, some people will see it and think that the judges won't see it. But they are going to see it. And then the other thing I would say to people, you go to class to learn. You will never make the best work when you go to a class. But year after year after year, I know exactly who's been trolling around the country teaching this or that, because all of a sudden, all of those things turn up on a cake. And after I do a bit of a questionnaire informally, I know before I even ask the question what the answer is going to be, but just to be sure it's clarified, they use the flowers that they made in the classroom. What can they be thinking? You can't, this is normal here that people do that.
Okay.
That is not going to be an award-winning flower because it's the first one you ever made. I mean, when I was busy doing my apprenticeship, as I call it, in my personal apprenticeship, in my teaching myself, actually, I would sit there for weeks working on one single flower until I got it right. And I can remember when I went to Kansas City to the ISIS convention, and there were several people in the room at the time, and I nearly had a nervous breakdown because I had some flowers sitting in a glass, and Mr. Vincent had put water in the bottom because he thought they were real. He said, you didn't put any water with the flowers. And Maxine Boyington, who's now deceased, and Susan Schatz and Claudia, a whole bunch of people that were at that convention, all were laughing their heads off because Doug watered the flowers. I mean, that's the goal.
Kerry,
you're going to do botanical. Get it as close as you can.
Well, he was paying
botanical, but you're not going to learn it.
Kerry, he was paying. Kerry, he was paying you a compliment.
Oh, he was. I was informed about that as well. But the lucky thing was that it hadn't sort of wandered up the stems too far, and I got there fairly quickly.
Okay.
Who knows why? After, and took care of it. But I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. That I can tell you.
Oh, that is so funny.
It was funny.
Carrie,
how on earth could you do that?
Well, now he knows better.
Oh, yes.
Kerry, you're globally traveled. You've traveled the world. You've lived in different countries. You're really an adventure seeker. We had a question from Joanne from our audience, and she said, of all the places you've traveled and lived, which is the closest to your heart aside from Australia?
I don't think that anybody can really answer that question. If you go with an open mind to a country, I find some international expat people have very closed minds. And the last place they ever lived in was always the best place they ever lived in. And they keep comparing their own country, and it's unfavorable to the country that they're living in. Nobody held a gun at their head to go there. They chose to go abroad because, you get more money to live abroad, you get allowances and all of that sort of stuff. You get round trips home for holidays and all sorts of added things that normally wouldn't happen when you're living here on a daily basis. So, when you go and you listen, you go to those welcoming type of luncheons and things, and all you can hear is 10 women in a table, and you're one of them. It's like, oh, God, I just hate it here. I can't stand it. It drives me crazy. I just want to go home. And it's like, I didn't muck around with them either. It's like the ship goes both ways, honey. If you don't like it here, you just get out of here and go back where you came from, because nobody wants to listen to a miserable person complaining, because you may have had no reason to be upset or even think negatively about the place. But if you listen to those 9 sitting at the table stuffing their way through a salad and dessert and in a very nice place where they should be happy to be,
right,
and all they can do is complain about where it is that they're at, then that's a pretty sad commentary to me. So I wasn't really a very excellent dinner guest there either, because I'd just say to them, listen, if there was people who were happy, quite happy to be here, but after listening to you, they're going to be like just like you, picking holes in where you are. So I've lived in Asia, and I loved Asia. I've lived in Europe, and I loved Europe. I've lived in Latin America, and I love that. And I am here in the United States, and I love that. Every place has its positives. Every place has its negatives. Nobody in the whatever affected country wants to hear from somebody else that comes from somewhere else telling them how awful is their country. So I keep my mouth shut. There are no real favorites, because every single place that I've been to, I had a great life. I did things that I would never have done. My husband was busy with his office stuff and the oil business that he was in, and I was traveling before I met him. I met him in London, and we got married actually very quickly after we did meet. But I was traveling on my own, and to this year I have been on the road and consider myself still on the road. I have no nationality except my Australian citizenship. I chose not to do dual citizenship because I don't want it, and it's been 46 years.
Wow. Oklahoma.
I've seen a lot.
Kerry, Oklahoma, out of all the places in the United States, I know it's why not Oklahoma, but why Oklahoma? It's not.
Oh, that's easy. My husband was in the oil business in Upstead. Here it was the seat of all things great and wonderful with oil equipment and oil companies.
Right.
And is a VP, and he was out there doing things in Holland and Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore. We went to Taiwan, Korea, Japan, you name it, I've been there. And that's another thing, taking a sidebar here. All of these people who have been traveling abroad teaching sugarcraft, lots of them, I have asked questions, and they're so busy telling me, oh, I was in Rome for 3 days, and then I went to Paris for 2, and I taught a class there, and I had to pack up real quick and get to wherever the next stop. Nobody saw anything.
Right.
I see everything.
Right.
I've lived there, or if I travel there, I spend time. And I'll make whatever I need to do to afford to do those things. But when I'm traveling, I don't want to go to Rome and not go and see what's happening in Rome. So,
rightfully
my
so.
attitude is different. I'm an inveterate traveler. Doug and I do lots of trips that nobody knows about, and mainly because everybody thinks that everybody needs to know every single move of your life. And if I feel like sharing it when I get back, I will be happy on Facebook and share. But I don't want my house burgled while I'm gone, so nobody is going to know that when I'm going anywhere, because my address is out there.
Right.
And I was actually speaking to a police sergeant last night at the dinner, and I said to him, have things changed since last year, because I see him every year, I said to him that I had been away, and he said, oh, right. He said, we did remember my advice. I said, yes, Mark, always remember the advice. Tell nobody anything. And I look at Facebook, and I just want to curl up.
Right.
When people are saying, oh, I'm leaving to go to Africa for a week.
Right.
Okay, so you
Bye-bye.
just told the whole world, and he told me that burglars use Facebook postings to see if they can find a way, because people are so open, they forget. It's
Naive,
not just your friends
right.
that are watching.
Right.
You know, these are people who maybe want to burgle a home.
Right.
They also may be child molesters. They may also be all sorts of strange things.
Right.
But in the big scheme of things, we look at our lives and think, oh, none of that comes across our bow. But yes, it does.
Yeah, you have to be very careful what you post.
Extremely.
Okay. We're
So,
going to go...
so I do tootle off and go to places and do things and come back, and if I'm in the mood to share pictures or whatever I'm telling, it's like
No,
everybody doesn't need to know every single movement that I make.
Absolutely, great point. I got to ask...
Everybody needs to have that same kind of privacy.
Kerry, I want to ask you one more question, and then we're going to go into 2 questions from our audience that they sent me prior to this. I've got to ask you this question only because I feel like a little bit obligated. Now, you have a signature thing. Your signature thing is A, that you're a very strict judge and you expect nothing but perfection. B, you're the judge with the headband.
Yep.
What's with the headband? Why are people fixated on it?
Well, they think the headband's a person, which I find very entertaining. It's like, I hate the headband, like the headband is an extension of me, so they can hate the headband and hate me by extension, or they love it, one or the other.
Right.
And I'm from a place where we wear stuff on our heads, and English people wear things on their heads. It's what we do. We go to events and we wear things on our heads. People here haven't worn things on their heads since the 50s.
Yeah.
And the hat designs and the hairband designs over here, they're forgettable. So I happened to be, actually the headband thing was quite by accident. In fact, I was kind of stunned myself that I was branded with a headband.
Right.
But it all started in 2001 when I went to London to launch my book, and I had been to all of the places that I needed to go, and then it was add-on time where Doug and I took another 2 weeks, and we did what we wanted to do without book signings and classes, or demonstrations, not classes. I don't do classes. And so, that was that. So we were down. I wanted to go to Fortnum & Mason's because had bought some tea there and I wanted to get some more. And next door to Fortnum & Mason's is Hatchard's, which is one of the oldest bookshops in England. And when I walked in, I was tickled to see that my book was stuck in the front on a table of the new releases, blah, 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 and that they had a big stack of them on the side. So I took a picture or 2 for posterity.
Right.
And the idea was always, when I go shopping, I am always very considerate of my husband. I don't drag him around in places he doesn't want to be.
Okay.
And I know he's very happy in a bookshop, so I stuck him in the bookshop and said, I'm going next door to Fortnum's, and I will be on the 2nd floor in the ladies' department, and when you're sick of looking at books, then you can come up there.
Right.
And collect me. And so while I was up there, I saw all of these lovely headbands, and I thought, I think I can wear those with my short hair. And I thought, if I get one of those where my hair was kind of cut in a claw, and in evening times when I go out with a formal dress, a long dress, I always thought it looked a bit boyish sometimes.
Okay.
And so I thought, I'll see if I can stick one of those on, and maybe that'll kind of formalize stuff. So I had 2 or 3 that I was trying on and having almost a heart attack at the price, but it's like, okay, I'm getting them anyway, because how many times can you be in England?
Uh-huh.
So he came up, and I shoved one on my head, and I said, I think I'm going to have a couple of these. And he said, go for it. He said, it looks good. So I bought them and headed on home, and in the meantime, I had that call, a little bit later, I should say, I had that call from Food Network in 2002, and when I went to do the show, I wore a plain black headband with not my chef's jacket, the chef jacket that they wanted me to wear.
Right.
I am not a chef, so I don't really feel like I need to be wearing a jacket forever. And so we did the first show, and it was all good. And everybody was happy, and I went home. And then I got another call and said, we want to use you with another partner. So I had two male partners in two different shows. And they, as I said, they were looking for the quote-unquote chemistry between us.
Right.
And so I arrived on set without the headband because I never thought, okay, I needed to, nobody mentioned it, you know.
It's not your uniform yet.
Grant came up to me. He was the executive producer of that particular episode.
Okay.
And he said, Kerry, he said, you do have that headband thingy somewhere, do you? And I said, well, no, not actually. I said, am I supposed to be wearing that thing? And he said, yeah. He said, we like it. And I said, okay.
So it's Grant's fault.
Well, since I was just here 4 days ago, I think that the headband is probably in the inside of the top part of my... He said, yeah. He said, you have to wear the headband. I said, okay. So I said, okay, here's the key of my room. Send a PA over, and they have my permission to look in my case and open. It's in the mesh part at the top of the lid, if it's there, because I don't think I took it out because I just washed my underwear and whatever needed to be washed and put it back in because I knew that there was like 3 days break between each of the episodes, and I would be going back to a different place because we were in Sea Island, Georgia for the first, and then went over to the Mall of America in Minneapolis or somewhere, I think it was, or I can't remember where it was. Anyway, there were so many of them, but so the PA goes over there and comes back headband in hand, and then Grant took me aside and he said, Kerry, he said, I know that you're not a TV person, but, you know, I've had years of this, and I'm just going to tell you right now, do not ever come here again without the headband.
Wow.
And so that was it.
Okay.
So it was them that really made the headband.
Okay.
And so now I'm branded with it, and I'm people hate it and get angry about it and say, what am I doing wearing it, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, if I'm out doing official stuff, I don't wear it to the grocery store, for God's sake, but if I'm out and it's like TV land, then I wear it because most of the people would be disappointed if I didn't.
I see.
And so I'm kind of caught in a catch-22, really.
I see. It's part of the Kerry Vincent, the cake judge, cake royalty. It's your crown.
It's branding.
It's your branding,
it's
right?
Pure and simple branding.
It's branding. That's hysterical. It has its own personality.
It does. Sometimes I think it's got little legs and wanders around all by itself.
I have a question from Allison. She wants to know who inspires you.
I actually don't like to be inspired by anybody. And the reason that I don't go to shows and the reason that I keep myself closeted in Oklahoma is because of my beginnings. The first cake that I did for a convention, an English editor came and she asked me if I would produce a cake for her, and I said, yeah, sure. And she said, I said, what kind of a cake? And she said, I'll leave it to you. She said, I like your style because you don't have a thumbprint. I said, okay. So I produced a cake and had it photographed and sent it off, and we had chats about direction and so forth. This was in the really early days. And she told me one time, she said, interesting thing about you is, she said, whenever I commission a cake from you, your cakes never look the same. There's no thumbprint. You know, I'm going to open up the film and it's not going to be recognizable to me that it's yours. Where lots of other people, as soon as I open the files, immediately I know, even if I have never seen the name, who made it. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, that sounds good. And she said, why do you think that is? And I said, well, first of all, I taught myself. Second of all, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there is barely even a cake shop here. And even in the early days, there was unreasonable one, but it was all focused towards the buttercream market. So what I wanted to do, they didn't even have tools for. So when I would go home on vacation to Australia, I would pick up everything I needed or thought I might need for an entire year. So I lived and marched to the tune of my own drummer. I was designing in my head. And then the more I thought about what she said is, if you go somewhere, you are influenced immediately by somebody else's work, because that's how it all is. And I thought, if I don't go there, then I'm not influenced by anybody. So I just stay away, and I see people, you know, who do things that pops up on my Facebook pages, and, you know, somebody shares a picture of somebody else's stuff, and it's all very nice, and yeah, but I don't want to go down that road. And I don't really sit there making cakes for Facebook either, which I see everybody doing, and I guess they think it's going to get them ahead. But all I see it as is, okay, I make a cake, and I go down to my photographer and spend a fortune on photography, and I'm going to shove it on Facebook? I don't think so. It has to be dedicated to go somewhere, like in print, or do something decent with the image. And then once you've done that, you have to be fair with the publication that you've been working for, because if you give it to them and then you throw it on Facebook, then why should people buy the magazines? So I am in their court. If they're willing to work with me, then I have to be fair to them. So so if you want to see it, fine, buy the book. I'm not making money from it. The publishers are, because it's magazines and it's out of my hands. But
you make a very good point with
that.
that.
I see it, and so I stay away from everybody else, because I don't want to get on this like endless copying thing, like the ombre thing. It's like from here to Africa, everybody's done it. But then I had the same thing with the gathers and the pleating that I did. I remember Jackie Schaffer from Cake Central said to me, Kerry, I just want to tell you that I am sick to death of every cake that comes in here. She wasn't sick of the cake. She was sick of the fact that she had to put inspired by Kerry Vincent under it, because it was obvious.
Right.
And I said, Jackie, I don't care. Been there, done that, moved on. You know, it's like 15 years ago I did that, 20 years ago. So, I do other things. I'm not locked into the same old thing. And like I said, I just march to the tune of my own drum, and I can be washing the dishes, I can be out in the garden, I can do a movie, or something will trigger an idea.
Okay.
And that's where it comes from, but I don't want it to be triggered from some other people.
Okay.
And currently, right now, the triggering is getting more and more limited, because a lot of people think that are new to the market that they don't need to learn to pipe, that all they need to do is to be able to do molds, and the cakes look pretty, but when you look into the cake, there's only one or two techniques. So getting back to competition, that's not going to get you anywhere anyway, because a child of 5 can push fondant into a mold and pop it out. They do it with their Crayola doughs and things. So it's, don't think that that's skillful.
Right.
It's an easy way. And I'm not saying that people in the commercial world shouldn't be using it, but the expectation of being successful in a cake show in competition is fairly limited if the only technique that you've got on the cake is a mold.
Right.
Even there might be different molds, but there's still a mold when it's all boiled down.
Like, it's okay for a commissioned cake that you're going to, because you need to do a mass production or what have you, but not for competition.
I can absolutely see that point. And that's why I have in the rules, if you're going to use molds, or you need to manipulate them and add something to it to make them different, that they're not just, anybody, I could have 25 people doing the same mold. And so then where would we be? So I need something to make it different.
Kerry, I have another question for you. I have Faraz, my friend here, and he has a great question for you. He wants to know if you've ever had a cake tragedy. Ever have a cake?
Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody. I think the worst one was the one that Doug told on me last night at dinner. In fact, we had a few little out-of-school chatters, but I was in the middle of making a cake for a bride, and everything was baked, and I do not use mixers, so I'm a really seriously from scratch person. I like seeing butter, I like seeing eggs, I like seeing sugar, and I like to be able to control it.
Yeah.
And so I had baked this cake, and it was an 18-inch, and I flipped it out, and I was close to the edge of the table, and it was just one of those things that's like, ooh, am I going to be able to save this? And, of course, it was hot, and it hit the floor, half of it. And then I started stuffing the rest of it down the garbage disposal because I was not going to fool around. I was in a hurry, and I needed to get another one baked, and it had set me back. And my neighbour was there, and she's like, Kerry, don't do that, don't do that. Give me the cake. And I said, okay, here's a cake tin. You go do whatever with the cake. I don't have time. I just need this out of my way. It was like, get it gone. But I basically lost, like almost split down the middle of that huge round. And it was so annoying. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's nobody in the cake world, if they're truthful, will say that they've never had a mishap. It can be small or large. I considered that was a large one. The good news was that I am also a person that works ahead, and I'm methodical. So, yes, it cut me down for time, but it wasn't desperado. You know,
right.
I knew that I had time factored in for trouble. I always factored in for trouble just in case.
Good. You're always prepared. So you're always prepared. So are you ready for our Baker's Dozen questions?
Sure.
Okay. So you guys, we're ready for this. Let's find out. Oops. Hang on one second. So first question here. Guys, you love Kerry? Let me see those hearts. Are you loving what she's telling us? I mean, this is information that you probably couldn't find in a book. Like, literally. This is just from experience. And that's what's important
what they call
here.
The School of Hard Knocks.
School of Hard Knocks. How do you like them apples, right? Okay. So what does Kerry Vincent do for fun?
Kerry Vincent travels. She's very curious, and she will always be curious. So I think one of the things is pretty much travel. I'm also an artist in my own right, so I don't paint. I'm a charcoal and pencil artist.
Oh.
So I enjoy doing that. And then whatever else is going, you know, I mean, I'm always up for a trip somewhere, even locally. And my tea time is probably one of the things that I really enjoy. And no matter where I go, tea is on the list. Do they have a tea room somewhere? And I will go.
Okay.
But you know, my expectations are pretty much like anybody else's. Is you work and you play and you get busy with the things that you like to do. And my husband is the founder of Angel Flight in the state of Oklahoma, so he's often gone taking patients to and from medical destinations. And so I help with that because, you know, if I was screaming in the background, why are you gone every 5 minutes, I would be hoarse, and it's not my style anyway. So it's also making the way for a partnership with 42 years of marriage. I think we've done pretty well.
Yeah.
And we've only been married to each other. We don't have a string of other marriages behind us. So we've been pretty committed, and I think part of it is because we both commit each other to live our own lives, and then we have our lives, and all of those integrate and make it a very interesting, good life.
Nice.
So, and I can go off and travel on my own, and he's busy with something else, and that's not a big issue, you know. So I'd probably say travel is one of the key things.
Perfect.
That I really enjoy.
Kerry, do you like to listen to music? What kind of music do you listen to?
The music that I listen to, most of you probably haven't even heard. Brian Ferry is one of my favourite ones. He was from the 70s, if we're looking for sort of a poppy poppy person.
Okay, poppy.
And then, you know, I've been through all the phases like everybody else. You know, I was around when the Beatles were having everybody screaming their heads off, except I didn't scream my head off. I saw Elvis in all of his genres before he fell off the perch and killed himself, basically committed suicide with drugs, as I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the earlier days where, you know, most of the people here wouldn't have even been born then, when the Platters and all of the early 50s songs and so forth has all been part of, you know, the things that I've enjoyed.
Okay.
And but I guess probably Ferry's one of my favourites, and then there's some in Australia that nobody's ever heard of, called one group called the Seekers.
Oh, we know the Seekers.
Another group called Red Gum. I really like them. And there's a few new ones that I listen to online because they're not played here, that come up from time to time that are hits in Australia, and I find them and listen to them on YouTube.
Okay.
And Shepherd's one of them. They have a really, really great act, and they're new and edgy and different.
Nice.
I don't like the heavy metal stuff. I'm not into the goth stuff. I'm not into rap because half the time I don't know what they're talking about, and it doesn't even really move me that much. It's like, I don't talk about cake all the time.
Yeah?
I don't live for cake. Cake's just a part of my life.
No, you're a very interesting person to speak to on a number of issues, to be honest. What's your zodiac sign, interesting lady?
I'm a Gemini, so basically I'm schizophrenic.
You're not schizophrenic. You just doubled the pleasure.
Yes.
What's your favorite color?
I don't have favourite colours because I wear just about everything, and I make things out of about every colour.
Okay.
I try not to be, once again, you know, the thumbprint impression that, oh, she's the lady in.
Okay.
I do wear a fair bit of black, I guess, and mainly that was driven by the fact that when you travel, if you have a bit of a spill or whatever, it's not as obvious on black
Right.
as it is on other things. So sometimes I get a bit black happy.
Okay.
But mostly, I mean, if you see images of me all over the place, I'm pretty much in different stuff all the time. I can go from fuchsia, you know, to the really soft, misty colours, pastels and so forth, to the stark stuff, but I haven't gotten around to wearing black lipstick and black nails yet. Although I did wear teal nails for ovarian cancer last year.
Okay. What's your favorite dessert and what's your least?
What's my what?
Your favorite dessert and what's your least favorite?
Well, the favourite is always and will be the pavlova.
Pavlova.
Which in all of its guises, there is not a single pavlova that I probably would refuse. The least favourite is soggy, puggy pies. I am sorry, but if the pastry's not good, I'm not going to eat it.
Soggy what?
Puggy pies.
I don't even know what that is.
It's not, it's soggy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite cake tool? What's your favorite cake tool of all time?
Actually, I guess probably the favorite in the end would have been a veining tool and a ball tool, because when I started out doing cake, a lot of people here that are listening and elsewhere of this genre of people that are in it now could not imagine a life without a million baby toys to play with, and every single thing that they ever wanted is available to them. We made our own, and we had to make ball tools, and we had to make veining tools, and they were usually, we carved them and whittled them out of wood. Then a few people got into it, and there were some plastic ones, and they started out with Angela Pretty in South Africa for colours, and Jill Matham, also from South Africa, for plastic, that everybody and his dog has copied wildly this day. But all of these sets of pink and yellow and whatnot that you see out there are knockoffs of hers, and they don't realise that sometimes once you make yourself a better, a Coke can obviously is edible, food safe, I should say.
Food safe, right?
And so you can cut them with scissors, and it's the sharpest stuff on the planet.
Right.
And when you cut out, you get no ghosting or fraying. So I made my own, and actually I still do when it suits me, when I can't find a cutter that suits me. And
what a great tip!
The backs of the little cutters, the little baby flowers and stuff, you would absolutely mash your thumbs into mincemeat when you're pushing down.
Right.
And so I figured a way to put bullet casings on the back of it so that when you press down with the casing and the cutter was on the end of it, because they fit, believe it or not,
Okay.
then you don't have a sore thumb.
Right, Tisha? Tisha's saying amazing information right now, isn't
Now
it?
you just throw they're brass, they're fine, they're not touching the food, and I just ran them through the dishwasher a million times until all of the stuff was inside gone.
What great savings.
They were good, and then I didn't have sore thumbs anymore.
What great savings and inventions. What do you want your legacy to be?
I don't think that anybody is ever going to really sit back and look at legacy in relation to us. We'll be remembered as nice ladies, people. With the passage of time, the ones who didn't love so much will come to love. But I think all of us are only good as 3 generations after we're gone. The immediate generation that loves you and doesn't want you to leave when your time comes, their children, and maybe the grandchildren. After that, we are gone. So there's no legacy at all.
Okay.
May sound dark, but it's reality.
Yeah, I'm a little sad about it, but I guess...
No, it's true. You just think, how many people, if I say names, like I bet you, there's a bunch of cake people that have come and gone, and people now, and they were from the 90s and the 80s, and they don't even know who they are.
True.
And yet they were well known at the
That's
time.
true. You're right. No, you're right. You're right. But
that's recent.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, because if they're not on Food Network right now, they probably don't.
Then it doesn't matter, you
No.
know. So yes, you've been on Food Network, but now you're not on Food Network, you know. So now I'm a writer. Tomorrow I'm in the middle of a book, so
Right.
I will, and it's nothing to do with cake or sugar. It's because an editor prevailed upon me to start it, and I'm up to 160 pages, I think, the last time I checked. Because she says that she feels that my life, she interviewed me and she accrued 90 pages, and she just said to me, you have to finish this. And I said, what do you mean I've got to finish it? I said, you just done the interview. Well, she's been in my life sending me weekly emails from 2010.
Ugh.
Every week. How many pages have you done? None.
I'm still working on it. I'm still working
I'm
on it.
168. She said, yes, you told me that last year. It's like, right,
God.
okay. I'll get around to it again. You know, it's just, you just have to go with the flow and take your life where it leads you.
Oh,
And to think about legacy, the only person who can answer the legacy question is the people who are listening and those out there who follow me, and then they will determine what the legacy is. I'm either going to be loved or hated. I will be remembered for what? New techniques, yes. Whatever, you know, or not, as the case may be. 2 generations from now, I could have faded from memory.
Well, you know what? To me and to many of us, you're a living legend, and you're. Again, I go back to the sports reference. You're basically a cake coach you're trying to mentor people.
With a big whip.
Yeah, right. With the big whip is right. But you're trying to.
Because I want them to do well.
Yes.
I'm on their side. I'm not on the other side.
She's on your side, folks. She's on your side. So she wants to see you in Oklahoma next year, 2017, right? I had the dates here. Let me drag them out over here. The October setup is September 29th, and it's going to be September 30th and October 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Show me some hearts. Who's going to enter? I know Jean is going to be there. I think Faraz said he's going to be there. I think we're just going to all haul out and go see Kerry next year.
Well, that sounds good. And
Right.
that gives me encouragement.
Well, I got to come out there and give you
It's a hard job. It's pretty much a one-person job until we get on site. And then I have some wonderful volunteers like Glenda Galvez and her husband Primo, and Edith Hall and her husband, and Lloydine, and there's a group that Rusty and Carolyn Mangold and Carter Holton, they all come and do the behind-the-scenes things that I've kind of gathered up and got ready for them to distribute or do whatever at the event. And then there's Leanne Pomelito, who comes as a whirling dervish and does things. So, you know, that's the hardcore of the so-said uncommittee committee, because I don't have meetings, we don't have drama, we just do it. And throughout the year, the minute the show is over, the next day I'm already busy setting up for the following year.
Well, thank you, Kerry, and thank you to your crew, and thank you to Doug, because we borrow you.
Yes, he does. He helps a lot.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you, and thank you, everybody out there, for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Kerry Vincent here for you today, and thank you so much for watching. Kerry, thank you so much for the wonderful, not only advice, but the backstory, your backstory, and also fondant. You know, it wasn't here for a long time, and basically you helped bring it here, and we thank you so much. Guys, tune in next week. Stay sweet and stay tuned, and I'll see you soon.